"Stop being dramatic," my dad shouted as I lay crumpled at the bottom of the stairs, gasping for air. My ribs screamed with pain where my brother Marcus had kicked me after shoving me down. I reached for my phone with trembling fingers, trying to dial 911, but Dad snatched it away before I could finish. "You're always exaggerating everything," my mom Patricia sighed from the kitchen doorway, not even bothering to check if I was seriously hurt. "My name is Tanya Rodriguez, and I'm 19 years old. I live in Tucson, Arizona, in what everyone believes is a normal suburban home. From the outside, we probably look like any other family. Dad works as a supervisor at Gravora Group, a manufacturing company. Mom is a part-time receptionist at a dental office. Marcus, my 22-year-old brother, just graduated from college and moved back home while job hunting. But behind our closed doors, I've been living in hell for years. The attack that left me gasping at the bottom of the stairs wasn't the first time Marcus had hurt me. It was just the worst so far. He'd shoved me because I'd accidentally bumped into him while carrying laundry upstairs. "Watch where you're going, idiot," he'd snarled, then pushed me so hard I tumbled down 12 wooden steps. When I hit the bottom, dazed and struggling to breathe, he followed me down and planted his boot right into my side. The crack I heard made my stomach drop, but this time felt different. As I lay there, watching my parents dismiss my pain like they always did, something cold and calculating settled in my chest. The way Dad grabbed my phone, the way Mom rolled her eyes at my suffering, I finally understood that they would never protect me. They were part of the problem. This wasn't just Marcus being a bully anymore. This was a family conspiracy to keep me silent and suffering. "Get up and stop making a scene," Dad ordered, standing over me with his arms crossed. "Your brother barely touched you." Mom nodded in agreement, already turning back to her coffee. "Honestly, Tanya, you'd think someone tried to murder you the way you carry on." I forced myself to stand, biting back a scream as my ribs protested. Marcus smirked at me from the top of the stairs, pleased with himself. In that moment, watching all three of them dismiss my agony, I made a decision that would change everything. I would document every single thing they did to me. I would gather evidence they couldn't deny or explain away. And when I had enough, I would make sure they all faced the consequences they'd avoided for so long. They thought I was dramatic and exaggerating. They were about to learn what real drama looked like. Growing up in our house had always been a nightmare, but it took me years to realize how abnormal my family truly was. Marcus had been hurting me since we were children, and our parents had been covering for him just as long. When I was 8 and he was 11, he pushed me off my bike so hard I needed stitches on my forehead. "She fell," Mom told the emergency room doctor. "Kids are so clumsy." When I tried to correct her, Dad squeezed my shoulder so hard it left bruises and whispered that if I contradicted my mother, I'd lose my allowance for a month. The pattern continued throughout my childhood. Marcus would hit me, push me, or worse, and our parents would either ignore it completely or find ways to blame me. "You must have provoked him," Mom would say. "Boys will be boys," Dad would shrug. By the time I reached high school, I'd learned to expect the abuse and accept that no one would help me. I thought this was just how families worked. But living in our house meant walking on eggshells constantly. Marcus had inherited Dad's quick temper and Mom's cold indifference. He'd corner me in the hallway and slam me against the wall if I looked at him wrong. He'd trip me in front of his friends and laugh when I fell. Once, when I was 16, he threw a glass at my head because I'd changed the TV channel. It shattered against the wall behind me, cutting my cheek. But when Mom saw the blood, she just sighed and said I should be more careful around broken glass. The worst part wasn't the physical pain, though. It was the isolation. My parents had trained me so well to keep quiet that I never told teachers, friends, or other family members what was happening. I was afraid no one would believe me, and honestly, I was ashamed. What kind of person gets beaten up by their own family and just takes it? I felt weak and pathetic, which is exactly what Marcus told me I was every time he hurt me. After high school, I'd planned to move out and go to college, but Dad convinced me to stay home and attend the local community college instead. "It's more practical," he said. "We can all help each other." What he really meant was that they wanted to keep me around as Marcus's personal punching bag and their unpaid housekeeper. I cooked, cleaned, did laundry, and endured whatever abuse they felt like dishing out. But something had shifted in me that day at the bottom of the stairs. Maybe it was the way Dad had grabbed my phone, preventing me from getting help. Maybe it was the complete lack of concern on Mom's face as I struggled to breathe. Or maybe it was Marcus's satisfied smirk as he watched me suffer. Whatever it was, I finally understood that this would never stop unless I made it stop. They had underestimated me for 19 years, treating me like I was too weak and stupid to fight back. They were about to discover exactly how wrong they were. 3 days after the stair incident, I was still moving carefully, my ribs aching with every breath. I'd wrapped them myself with an elastic bandage I bought at the pharmacy, telling the cashier I'd hurt myself exercising. The bruises on my torso were spectacular shades of purple and black, but no one in my family had bothered to check on me or ask how I was feeling. That indifference was about to become their biggest mistake. I started by researching domestic violence laws in Arizona. What I learned made my blood run cold. Marcus's actions weren't just sibling rivalry or family dysfunction, they were felony assault. Dad's interference with my attempt to call 911 was obstruction of justice. Mom's pattern of helping cover up the abuse made her an accessory. I'd been living with criminals my entire life, and they'd convinced me it was normal. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I sat in my bedroom, laptop open, reading statute after statute that described exactly what my family had been doing to me for years. Aggravated assault, child abuse, conspiracy, intimidation of a witness. The list went on and on. Every accident they'd blamed me for. Every time they'd convinced me I was overreacting. Every bruise they'd told me to hide. It was all evidence of serious crimes. But I also learned something else crucial. I would need proof. Solid, undeniable documentation that showed the pattern of abuse and the family's conspiracy to hide it. Marcus was careful to hurt me where bruises wouldn't show, and our parents were experts at gaslighting me into believing I was the problem. If I was going to take them down, I needed to be smarter than they were. That night, I made my first trip to an emergency room. I drove to a hospital across town, somewhere my family would never think to look for me. I told the triage nurse I'd been pushed downstairs by my brother and kicked in the ribs. I described the family's history of covering up his violence. The doctor who examined me was thorough and compassionate, ordering x-rays that showed 2 cracked ribs and taking photographs of the bruising pattern that clearly indicated I'd been kicked while on the ground. "Have you considered filing a police report?" Dr. Williams asked gently. "This level of injury from a family member is concerning." "Not yet," I said truthfully. "But I'm documenting everything now." She nodded and made sure the medical records clearly stated that my injuries were consistent with domestic violence. She also gave me information about local resources and support groups. For the first time in my life, an adult was taking my pain seriously and treating it like the crime it actually was. As I drove home that night, medical records safely hidden in my car, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Hope. My family thought they had all the power, that they could hurt me indefinitely without consequences. They were about to learn that their 19-year-old victim had grown up to become their worst nightmare. 2 weeks after my first hospital visit, Marcus gave me the perfect opportunity to gather more evidence. I was in the kitchen making dinner when he stormed in, furious about something that had happened at his job interview that day. He'd been rejected for a position at Driftshade Limited, and in typical Marcus fashion, he needed someone to take his anger out on. "This is all your fault," he snarled, getting in my face while I stirred pasta sauce. "If I didn't have to deal with your constant drama at home, I could focus on my career." I kept my voice level, knowing I was being recorded by the tiny camera I'd hidden behind the coffee maker the day before. I don't know what you mean, Marcus. I haven't done anything to interfere with your job search. Don't give me that innocent act, he spat, shoving me backward against the counter. The edge dug into my spine, but I forced myself not to react. Everything would be better if you just disappeared. He grabbed my wrist and twisted it until I gasped, then slammed my hand down on the hot stove burner. I screamed and jerked away, clutching my burned palm against my chest. The smell of singed skin filled the kitchen, and tears streamed down my face from the pain, but Marcus just stood there looking satisfied. "Oops," he said mockingly. "Maybe you should be more careful around the stove." That's when Dad walked in, took one look at my burned hand and Marcus's defensive posture, and immediately sided with his golden child. "What happened here?" he demanded, but his tone made it clear he was already blaming me. "She burned herself being clumsy," Marcus lied smoothly. "I tried to warn her the burner was hot, but she didn't listen." Dad nodded as if this made perfect sense, even though the red handprint on my wrist told a completely different story. "Tanya, how many times do we have to tell you to pay attention when you're cooking? You could have burned the whole house down." I stared at him in disbelief. My hand was throbbing, already blistering from the burn, and he was lecturing me about being careful? "Dad," he pushed me and forced my hand onto the burner. "Look at my wrist. You can see his fingerprints." "I don't see anything," Dad said coldly, not even bothering to look. "And I'm getting tired of you constantly trying to get your brother in trouble. Maybe if you focused on taking responsibility for your own actions instead of blaming everyone else, you wouldn't have so many accidents." Mom appeared in the doorway, assessed the situation in seconds, and immediately joined their gaslighting campaign. "Oh, Tanya, not again. How many times are you going to hurt yourself and try to blame Marcus? It's getting embarrassing." I felt that familiar rage building in my chest. But this time I channeled it into cold determination instead of frustrated tears. Let them think they'd won. Let them believe their lies were convincing. The hidden camera had captured everything. Marcus's assault, my clear explanation of what happened, and both parents' immediate dismissal of obvious evidence. This footage would be devastating in court. "You're right," I said quietly, cradling my burned hand. "I should be more careful." All three of them looked surprised by my sudden compliance, but Marcus recovered quickly and smirked. "Finally learning your lesson. Maybe now you'll stop being such a drama queen about every little thing." I nodded meekly and excused myself to run cold water over the burn. But as I stood at the bathroom sink, watching the blisters form on my palm, I smiled for the first time in weeks. They thought they'd broken me, that their intimidation tactics had finally worked. They had no idea they'd just handed me the most damning piece of evidence yet. The camera had captured a clear felony assault, witnessed by two adults who immediately conspired to cover it up. 3 crimes for the price of 1. My family was building their own prison sentence, one brutal incident at a time. By the end of my 2nd month of evidence gathering, I had medical records from 4 different hospitals, hidden camera footage of 3 separate assaults, and a detailed journal documenting years of abuse. But I knew I needed something more dramatic, something so clear and undeniable that even the most skeptical prosecutor would be outraged. Marcus was happy to provide exactly what I was looking for. It happened on a Tuesday evening in late September. I was studying for my criminology exam, a class I'd enrolled in specifically to better understand the legal system I planned to use against my family. Marcus burst into my room without knocking, clearly drunk and looking for trouble. "Turn that music down," he slurred, even though I wasn't playing any music. "Some of us are trying to think." "There's no music playing, Marcus," I said calmly, making sure to speak clearly for the audio recorder hidden in my desk lamp. "Maybe you should go sleep it off." His face darkened at my suggestion, and I saw the familiar rage building in his eyes. "Don't tell me what to do, you little bitch. I'm so sick of your attitude." He lurched forward and backhanded me across the face so hard I saw stars. I fell sideways off my desk chair, hitting my shoulder against the corner of my dresser. But instead of staying down like I usually did, I pushed myself up and faced him again. "That hurt, Marcus. Why did you hit me?" "Because you deserved it," he snarled, advancing on me again. "And because I can. What are you going to do about it? Run crying to Mommy and Daddy? We both know they don't give a shit about your fake tears." He grabbed me by the hair and slammed my head against the wall, then kicked me in the stomach when I doubled over. I collapsed to the floor, genuinely hurt, but also calculating how this footage would look to a jury. Marcus drunk and violent, clearly enjoying my pain, bragging about the family's indifference to my suffering. It was perfect. "Please stop," I gasped, staying in character as the helpless victim while my hidden camera captured every moment. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You exist," he said, kicking me again. "That's enough." That's when I heard footsteps in the hallway, and both our parents appeared in my doorway. For one wild moment, I thought they might actually intervene, might finally see their son for the monster he really was. Instead, Mom looked annoyed at the disturbance, and Dad looked bored. "What's all the noise about?" Dad asked, as if finding his daughter beaten on the floor was a minor inconvenience. "Tanya fell and started crying." Marcus lied easily. "She's being dramatic as usual." I looked up at my parents from the floor, my face already swelling from the backhand, blood trickling from where my head had hit the wall. "He's lying. He hit me and kicked me. You saw him standing over me when you walked in." Mom rolled her eyes theatrically. "Tanya, this is getting ridiculous. You can't keep fabricating these stories every time you have an accident. We're not stupid." "Your mother's right," Dad agreed. "We're tired of being manipulated by your constant victim act. Marcus was just trying to help you up, and somehow you turned it into this whole production." The gaslighting was so extreme, so obviously coordinated, that I almost laughed out loud. They were essentially confessing to conspiracy on camera, showing exactly how they'd trained themselves to deny reality whenever Marcus hurt me. No jury in the world would believe this level of cruelty was normal or acceptable. "I understand," I said quietly, slowly getting to my feet. "I'm sorry for causing drama." All three of them looked satisfied with my apparent surrender, never suspecting that they'd just filmed their own confessions to years of criminal conspiracy. The final piece of evidence I needed came in early October, exactly 3 months after I'd started my documentation campaign. I'd been visiting different emergency rooms throughout Tucson, building a medical record that showed escalating violence and increasingly creative injuries. Each hospital visit added to my growing file of proof, and each doctor who examined me became more concerned about the obvious signs of ongoing domestic abuse. The breakthrough came when Marcus lost his temper over something completely trivial. I'd accidentally used the last of the milk for my cereal. He exploded with a violence that shocked even me, grabbing a baseball bat from his closet and threatening to teach me a permanent lesson. What he didn't know was that I'd upgraded my hidden camera system the week before, installing high-definition devices that captured both video and audio with crystal clarity. "You think you're so smart," he raged, waving the bat inches from my face. "You think you can just take whatever you want and never face consequences. Well, I'm done being patient with you." I backed against the wall, genuinely terrified, but also calculating how this footage would play in court. A grown man threatening a teenage girl with a weapon while she tried to escape. It was the kind of scene that would make prosecutors salivate. "Marcus, please," I said, making sure my voice carried clearly to the hidden microphone. "I'll buy more milk. I didn't mean to use it all." "Too late for apologies," he snarled, swinging the bat and embedding it in the wall inches from my head. Chunks of drywall rained down on my shoulders, and I couldn't suppress a scream of fear. That's when our parents rushed in, drawn by the commotion. They saw Marcus holding a baseball bat, saw the hole in the wall where he'd just missed my head, saw me cowering and shaking with terror. Any reasonable parents would have been horrified, would have immediately intervened to protect their daughter. Instead, Dad looked annoyed at the property damage. "Marcus, be careful with that thing. You're making holes in the wall." "She made me lose my temper," Marcus said, as if that justified attempted assault with a deadly weapon. She never thinks about anyone but herself. Mom nodded sympathetically at her son. We know she can be frustrating, honey, but maybe try not to damage the house when you're dealing with her behavior. I stared at them in amazement. They were more concerned about cosmetic damage to the wall than the fact that their son had just tried to bash my skull in with a baseball bat. The level of dysfunction was so extreme it was almost surreal. Did you see what just happened? I asked, my voice shaking with genuine emotion. He almost hit me with that bat. The wall is destroyed because he missed my head by inches. Don't be dramatic, Mom sighed. Marcus was obviously just trying to get your attention. Maybe if you listened the first time instead of being stubborn, he wouldn't have to raise his voice. Raised his voice? I repeated incredulously. He swung a baseball bat at my head. I don't see any bat, Dad said flatly, even though Marcus was still holding it. And I don't see any damage to you. All I see is another one of your attention-seeking performances. The complete denial of reality was so blatant, so perfectly documented by my hidden cameras, that I knew I finally had everything I needed. 3 months of systematic evidence gathering had given me an airtight case that no defense attorney could possibly explain away. My family had just finished building their own prison cells, one lie at a time. On November 15th, exactly 4 months after Marcus had first shoved me down the stairs, I walked into the Pima County Attorney's office with a briefcase full of evidence that would destroy my family's lives. I'd scheduled the appointment under the pretense of reporting ongoing domestic violence, but what I actually delivered was a comprehensive criminal case complete with medical records, video evidence, and detailed documentation spanning years of abuse. Prosecutor Janet Morrison listened in growing amazement as I presented my carefully organized evidence. The medical records alone painted a horrifying picture of escalating violence, but the video footage was devastating. Watching Marcus assault me while our parents covered for him left even the experienced prosecutor visibly shaken. This is one of the most thoroughly documented cases of domestic violence I've ever seen, she said, reviewing the photographs of my injuries. The pattern of escalation and family conspiracy is clear. We can definitely pursue criminal charges against all 3 of them. I handed her the flash drives containing hours of hidden camera footage. The videos show not just the physical assaults, but the coordinated lying afterward. They've been gaslighting me into believing this was normal for my entire life. Morrison nodded grimly as she reviewed my timeline of events. Aggravated assault, conspiracy to commit assault, obstruction of justice, witness intimidation. We're looking at serious felony charges here. Are you prepared to testify against your family in court? Absolutely, I said without hesitation. They've hurt me for the last time. That afternoon, Morrison presented my evidence to a grand jury. The indictments came down 3 days later. Marcus faced charges of aggravated assault, assault with a deadly weapon, and domestic violence. Dad was charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy to commit assault. Mom faced accessory charges and conspiracy. All 3 counts carried potential prison sentences. The arrests happened simultaneously on a Thursday morning while I was safely at school. By the time I got home, police cars were gone and the house was empty. My family's 19-year reign of terror was finally over. The trial lasted 2 weeks, and I testified for 3 full days. Sitting in that courtroom, facing my family across the room while describing years of abuse in clinical detail, should have been terrifying. Instead, I felt a calm satisfaction watching their confident facades crumble as the evidence mounted against them. Marcus's defense attorney tried to portray the assaults as normal sibling roughhousing taken out of context. That argument collapsed when the prosecutor played the hidden camera footage of him swinging a baseball bat at my head while I cowered against the wall. The jury's horrified expressions made it clear they weren't buying the boys will be boys defense. Dad's lawyer attempted to claim he'd never witnessed any violence, only arriving after accidents had already occurred. The prosecution destroyed that lie by showing footage of him watching Marcus hurt me and immediately collaborating on cover stories. His own voice on the recordings, dismissing obvious injuries as drama, condemned him completely. Mom's defense was perhaps the most pathetic. Her attorney painted her as a naive mother, manipulated by a dominant husband and violent son. But the video evidence showed her actively participating in the gaslighting, often being the first to dismiss my injuries and blame me for provoking Marcus. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Marcus was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 8 years in prison. Dad received 5 years for conspiracy and obstruction. Mom got 3 years for accessory charges and conspiracy. The judge's final words before sentencing made it clear he found their crimes particularly heinous, given the family relationship and their victim's age. As the bailiffs led my family away in handcuffs, Marcus finally looked at me with something other than contempt. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. The monster who'd terrorized me for 19 years was finally afraid of his victim's power, and the irony was delicious. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Marcus struggled in prison, his arrogance making him a target for other inmates who had little tolerance for men who hurt women. Dad lost his job at Gravora Group when his criminal record became public, and his pension was garnished to pay my medical expenses. Mom found herself ostracized by neighbors and former friends who couldn't believe she'd helped cover up her son's violence against her own daughter. They'd spent 19 years building a conspiracy of cruelty, and now they would spend years paying for it behind bars. As for me, I transferred to Arizona State University with a full scholarship for domestic violence survivors, majoring in criminal justice with plans to become a prosecutor myself. Some people might say that revenge consumed me, but I preferred to think of it as justice finally served. After a lifetime of being told I was weak and dramatic, I'd proven that the quiet girl they'd underestimated was actually their greatest threat.